This presentation is brought to you by the MFOA.
Hello everyone, welcome to MFOA's webinar entitled Rounding Up Asset Management Tools, New and Existing Part 1, Tools, Tips, and Next Steps. We have a very good cross-section of members attending this webinar today from small, medium, and large municipalities, so we welcome you today. And now I'd like to introduce you your presenters. Dan Cowan, Executive Director of MFOA, has 30 years of experience in municipal finance issues as a result of work done in municipalities, Municipality of Metropolitan Toronto and Region of Peel, and as a consultant. In addition, Dan worked on municipal finance policy at the Province of Ontario as well as at the Municipal Finance Officers Association. Tom Bradbury is an independent consultant and has closely associated with MFOA since 2001. Prior to 2001, he spent 13 years with the City of Hamilton's Finance Department and was the last treasurer of the old City of Hamilton. Tom has assisted MFOA with many of their education programs. In addition, Tom provides ongoing daily management support to the One Investment program. We are very excited to have them here with us today. Thank you, and let's get started. Dan?
Thanks, Eunice. Welcome to this webinar on asset management. I will provide you with an overview, a high-level overview of the various tools that we have built in partnership with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. These tools include 3 templates, an Excel spreadsheet for capital cost and revenue projection that my colleague Tom Bradbury will take you through immediately, an infrastructure report card, which is also on our agenda for this morning, as well as a checklist to help identify gaps in asset management plans and identify next steps. All of these templates are going to be dealt with in this morning's session. In addition, we produced a number of asset management case studies, what we call our honor roll. And in addition to that, we have 6 capacity building tip sheets involving how to report to Council on asset management plans, meeting the requirements of Ontario Regulation 28409, the budget expense regulation, how to budget for long-term financial plan costs, including potential revenue streams, and how to integrate that with strategic planning, evidence-based council decision-making on issues such as funding, infrastructure deficits, setting budget priorities, and capital budgeting. And finally, the last deliverable we have are a series of webinars, the first of which is today, and as Eunice indicated, the second of which will be next August, August the 12th. I want to also invite all of you, we welcome your feedback, and I invite all of you to contact us, any of the speakers in the next coming weeks as you use these tools. If you have questions or comments or suggestions for improvement, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Tom, who's going to take you through the first of our templates, which is the cost and revenue forecasting model. Tom?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon. We're going to go through the municipal asset costs and revenue projection model. It's actually an Excel spreadsheet. The ministry approached MFOA in early 2014 concerning the provision of training on long-term asset management to assist municipalities in the development and revision of asset management plans. The municipal asset costs and revenue projection model is designed to project asset costs and associated revenues over a 50-year time horizon. In developing the model, MFOA approached a number of municipalities to provide actual asset listings. Accordingly, the sample models utilize real data. MFOA is providing 3 blank and 3 populated versions of the model with maximum inventory lines of 2,500, 10,000, and 25,000. The populated models were shared with the participating municipalities and the ministry. Based on their feedback, the models include their suggested improvements. The model is not designed to match exactly to accounting balances, especially so once data cleaning, which we will speak to, is performed. Given that, periodic reconciliation of original inventory lists and the data populating the model will be required. A number of integrity checks are included in the model design such that unbalanced cross-reference checks will produce error messages. In the model planning stages, consideration was given to computing capacity, efficiency, and convenience for the intended users. We suspected that the intended target audience to be the small to medium-sized municipalities, and as such offered the 2,500, 10,000, and 25,000 line versions. The performance of the model varies considerably as the maximum listing size changes and works most efficiently with a smaller model version. Giving heed to the computer performance issue, prior to loading data into the model, some data cleaning is recommended. Reducing the listings below the 2,500 or 10,000 line thresholds will improve performance considerably. We are recommending 2 data cleansing operations before loading. In the collection of data required to build and test the model, the municipality supplied an inventory list with some 21,000 lines listing each of the assets owned by the municipality. A review of the data revealed that approximately 9,000 items were denoted not intended to be replaced. And as much as the model is designed to project future replacement and rehabilitation costs, if an item is denoted not intended to be replaced, it need not be loaded into the model. That list, though, should be saved as the value of the annual amortization accrued on it will be added to the amortization calculated in the model to equal the FIR Schedule 40 reported in column 16. We will speak more on this issue in the section below entitled Detailed Asset Information tab, column 8, Amortization. Further review of the same data found that there were 6,000 items with identical in-service and life expectancies. Sorting and summing blocks of these items prior to loading into a single line for each asset type, in-service year, and life expectancy reduced the number of loaded lines in the model by another 5,800. It is assumed that the more detailed asset listing required for accounting and physical inventory lists will capture in-year changes within the groupings created for the model, and annual changes are incorporated into the following model years. In this case, these 2 operations reduce the lines loaded into the model to approximately 6,800 from the more detailed list supplied of 21,000. Now we're going to move to the actual model itself. Okay, looking at the Control and Info tab, all yellow shaded areas are to be populated by the user, and that data will drive the model calculations at output. The model year cannot exceed the most recent year preloaded on the Construction Index tab. Current version of the model includes construction index values to 2013. It is assumed that revenues will rise at a minimum to keep up with inflation and offset future inflationary pressures on replacement costs. In future, the model will require an annual update to the Construction Index tab to capture the most current information and allow the user to move forward with the model. The user may wish to populate the annualized construction index with a percentage, which is right there. Although it is recommended that the annualized construction index cell be left at 0, and accordingly all future replacement costs will be calculated in current model year dollars. Moving on to the Detailed Asset Information tab, the Municipal ID column. Which is right there, is an optional user input column that may cross-reference to the original asset inventory listing or any alternative municipal requirements. Loaded or blank, this column has no bearing on the model outputs. Again, on the Detailed Asset Information tab, column 1, Asset Description, it is again an optional input by the user with no bearing on the model outputs. Column 2 of the Detailed Asset Info tab, Functional Description, is a mandatory user input column. For inclusion in the summary information, each line item must match the functional descriptor numbers used in FIR Schedule 40. A complete listing of these descriptor numbers is found in Schedule 1 of the model user guide. Column 3 is again a mandatory user input. Each input line must have a classification number matching FIR Schedule 51 for inclusion in the model summary outputs. A complete listing of the classification numbers is again found on Schedule 1 in the user guide. Column 4, in-year service, is again mandatory input by the users. It's loaded with a 4-digit number representing the year in which the asset was put into service. Column 5, life expectancy, is again mandatory user input. All items with the exception of land must be populated with an original life expectancy in years from the original in-service year. Note, it is not the current remaining useful life. For all assets that represent land, enter 0 in this column. In doing so, you will find that the historic cost populates the land cost in column 11 with exactly the same value. Column 6, delay now cost in years as an optional user input column. By way of example, you might decide, for whatever reason, the asset is in good shape and can have the life extended past the normal life expectancy. A water pipe with an expected life of 70 years is still in very good shape and is expected to provide service for an additional 20 years. You could, for this or other similar assets, assign a 90-year life expectancy, even though your average lifespan for water pipes remains 70 years. On the other hand, if your engineers tell you 90 years is a better assumed lifespan for water pipes, then 70 years, you could consider altering the lifespan for water pipes to 90. The lifespan for asset management purposes does not necessarily have to match the lifespan you use for financial reporting purposes. Looking to line 115, in-service year in column 4 is 1950. There. Expected life expectancy in column 5 is 60 years. So by way of definition, in 2010, the asset should have been fully amortized and replaced. If we're talking about the same water pipe and you add the 20 years in delay now costs, you're going to see that the replacement is now 2030 instead of the original 2010. If I put it back to 0, it's a replacement in the current year of the model. Moving to column 7, as a requirement to fulfill PSAB 30 and 50 in the ongoing calculation of annual amortization expense, the municipality has a historic cost for each asset. This historic cost drives the annual amortization calculated in the model as well as future replacement costs. It's also a mandatory input by the user. Last thing we're going to look at before we go to the computed columns is the revenue gap. On this tab, the user is required to enter all revenues earmarked for capital asset replacement over the life of the model. Some sample source descriptions are preloaded into the model, and some lines are blank and variable used to the municipality. Here's examples of the preloaded, and here's all the blank spaces that are available to the user. Moving down to line 34, A sum of each year's revenues and costs for each year is denoted, as well as in line 39, the accumulation of surplus or shortfall position over time is calculated. Column 8, model year -1 amortization is calculated, and it's highlighted in pink now as opposed to yellow, so you'll know that it's a calculated column. By way of example, if the model year is 2012, an item with an in-service year of 2002 and a 10-year life expectancy is fully amortized in 2011. Similarly, if the model year is 2012, an item with an in-service year of 2011 will have one full year of amortization appearing in the 2011 amortization column. For this example, assuming all the data is complete and loaded correctly, the 2011 total amortization in pink in the control total line up here on line 15 should match the total of the 2011 FIR Schedule 40, column 16. In the data cleaning process, if you have excluded any assets that are not already fully amortized but are not expected to be replaced, the amortization for these items must be added to the amortization control total line to get back to line 15 of the FIR. Net book value in column 9 can have a calculated value of 0. This can occur when Part C above yields a value equal to or less than 0. Those items are either fully amortized in the model year or any other prior year. They are also now cost calculated and populated in columns 12 and 14 here. And over a little further here. All columns to the right of column 14 represent each year of the 50 years of future asset replacement totaled for each asset item replaced in that year across the control totals on line 15. So beginning each and every year, there's the total of the replacement value calculated for that year. Column 10 represents the replacement value at the beginning of the model year and is a calculated column. Replacement year at the beginning of the model year is equal to A times B plus C, where A is the historic cost in column 7 and B is the construction index value corresponding to the year previous to the model year found in column AC on the construction index tab. Inflator construction index in the model year divided by the construction index value for the service year. See line 91. There. In 1922, the value of this particular item was $14,206. Once you multiply by the inflator construction index, the current value at the beginning of 2012 to replace that item is $413,861. Column 11 is the land cost as calculated in this column. We mentioned before that if you enter 0 into the in-service year, you're going to get the land value showing up in this column here. So all these are land costs. If you go back over here, you're going to find the life expectancy for all those is 0. We're assuming land values neither appreciate nor depreciate over time, and there is no replacement value. Moving to columns 12 and 13, they're calculated and represent all assets that had a net book value of 0 either before or as of the model year. The model is suggesting that these items should be replaced in the model year. Column 14 is the sum of any items that were found in columns 12 or 13. So it's either they became, had to be replaced in the model year or before the model year, and the sum of those two is found in column 14. All columns to the right of column 14 represent future year replacement costs for the 49 years following the model year. Total replacement cost over the life of the model are summed for each item on the extreme right. In this column right here. Note that some items that are replaced more than once over the 50 years. So if you have a life expectancy of 4 or 5 years, you're going to find where there are items that are replaced more than once over the 50 years. And last, we're going to move on to the summary pages. Look to the functional summary tab. It's here. The chart at the top of this tab, the data for each detailed functional descriptor as outlined in the FIR Schedule 40 is summarized by historic cost, amortization, net book value, and land cost, as well as the projected annual replacement cost for each of the 50 years of asset replacement. At the bottom, we're going to find a summary. The data is summarized by major functional descriptions that are also found in FIR Schedule 40. You can also note, I suggested that there was integrity checks. This line here tells us that we're in balance. It says check or okay, you're good. If it says error, there's something wrong in the total. Segmented summary tab. In this tab, the detailed information is summarized in accordance with the capital asset classes as defined by Schedule 51 of the FIR, showing historic cost, net book value, replacement cost as at the model year, and the percentage of remaining useful life for the sum of the items in each asset class. The data is further split into general capital assets and infrastructure assets, and also depicted in the FIR Schedule 51. And again, you're going to find integrity checks within the model. The last thing we're going to look at is an aging tab. In accordance with the asset classes defined by Schedule 51 of the FIR, future replacement costs are summarized as those items with a current life expectancy of 0 for each of the future 5 decades as calculated by the model. To the right, additional aging illustrations are found. Again, with integrity checks included. And that brings us to the end of this particular portion. If you have any questions, you can send them in now. And in the meantime, anything up there? In the meantime, I've turned it over to Dan Cowan for the second portion of the webinar.
Thanks, Tom. I do want to invite folks, if they wish, to send in questions. It looks like we have none for Tom at the moment, but we did indicate we will be having 2 question periods in this webinar. The second one will come at the end of my remarks. But feel free if something hits you about Tom's remarks, we can certainly take questions on any topic at the end.
We have a question right now.
Oh, we do have a question.
Yes.
Excellent.
Can you please go over where you put the FIR totals?
FIR totals. I presume you're speaking to
For balancing.
balancing. Assuming that you've put all the information into the model correctly, the FIR totals, for instance, in the amortization column, right there, should match the FIR schedule, which summarizes the amortization for 2011.
Okay, if there are no questions, then we'll continue with the second half of the presentation. Take it away, Dan.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. I will be discussing, as I indicated, two of our new tools today, report cards and checklists. Many municipalities have completed an initial asset management plan or state of the infrastructure report. MFOA has reviewed a number of these. Timeframes and budgets were limited for many members' asset management plans, and so they were built on what was readily available. And we know that asset management is an ongoing process and that initial AMPs will need to be refined and updated. The report card is a tool for communicating about asset management as we move into the next phase, and the checklist is intended to ensure that we cover all of the important steps that need to be completed. So much of what you will hear today is informed by our review of a significant number of asset management plans that were completed for the end of December of 2013. Almost every asset management plan that we looked at utilized some type of report card. Report cards are great tools to summarize large amounts of complex data in an understandable way. In this brief session, we'll discuss the use of report cards as a communications device, and we'll provide a high-level overview of the types of report cards that have emerged and are now in current use. Often when people think of asset management plans, they think of engineering studies, condition ratings, service standard studies, large data sets, sophisticated asset management software packages, and Excel spreadsheets. And it is true that all of these are almost always a part of an asset management plan. However, it is easy to forget one of the absolutely fundamental elements of asset management planning, which is communications. Well thought out communications and communication plans are required between staff and client if you have used consultants, among departments because asset management planning is an interdepartmental activity, between staff and council, and between staff, council, and the public. Communication is ongoing and starts on day one. It does not start 18 months into the asset management plan after staff have crunched the numbers. Communicating across the various groups can be challenging given the magnitude of work involved with a typical asset management plan and the volume of data that it supports. And you saw from Tom's spreadsheet, in some cases, that can be very substantial, a spreadsheet going down 25,000 lines potentially. Infrastructure report cards, as I think you'll see soon, are very useful tools to communicate complex information in easy and understandable ways. So report cards not only summarize large amounts of complex data, but they can serve to educate residents about the businesses the municipality is in and the extent and scope of the assets on hand to provide service. Based on conversations with municipal staff and consultants, we have concluded two things. The public does not appreciate the extent of the assets that they own or the commitment and resources needed to keep them functional. But they do value their assets and by extension, or pardon me, they do value their services, and by extension, the infrastructure needed to deliver them. And report cards can help to explain the businesses that you are in, since they tend to be reported by business function. They provide a link between service levels that citizens do understand and the assets that support those services. It can build support for asset management work to keep assets in a state of good repair, and report cards can show progress over time to residents and council when they see that asset conditions are improving and services continue to be provided to a high level with no service deterioration. While report cards are not the only tool to achieve some of these goals, they are one of the most effective. The foundation of any asset management plan, as Tom just showed you, is the asset inventory. Inventories can contain significant amounts of information for every single tangible capital asset owned by the municipality. The inventory information routinely includes asset class and subclass, if any, such as roads by surface type, an asset description. For water mains, this might include material, location, length, depth, diameter. Other municipal identifiers such as the department, division, or serial number of the asset, the in-service year, the life expectancy or remaining life of the asset, the amortization, both annual and accumulated, replacement value and estimated year of replacement, and quite possibly your inventory will also contain condition ratings, risk ratings, performance ratings, or capacity ratings. All of that information for each asset, and maybe thousands of assets or tens of thousands of assets across a dozen or 24 business lines or more. How do you make sense of it all? And I know you're all saying at the very same time, report cards. That's right, the answer is report cards. Asset inventory has all or some of this data for hundreds of thousands of assets and possibly tens of thousands, and report cards have become a very useful and popular way of summarizing all of this data on infrastructure in a simple way that can convey clear messages to municipal staff, council, and the public. A well-constructed report card contains volumes of information, including the condition or performance of assets by asset class, trend analysis with respect to asset condition and performance, progress on asset maintenance since the previous report card, major challenges by asset class to keep the assets in a state of good repair, and possibly the risks and consequences of asset failure by asset category and class. A word about data and report cards. Report cards summarize the state of your infrastructure based on the information you have about your infrastructure. If you do not have condition ratings or have not yet conducted service level reviews or other key components, your information or data may still need refining. It is a simple truism to say that report cards based on good data and refined data will be more informative and useful than those with less refined data. In short, a report card is only as good as the information you have in it. And perhaps at this point, I'll just take a half a second to indicate that much of our training on asset management at MFOA through the fall of this year is going to specifically be focused on how to take the asset management plan that you have and introduce some of these refinements to start to get at some better numbers. So I want to talk a little bit now about the types of report cards that we've seen and that are in common circulation. With the recent emphasis on asset management at every level of government in countries all around the world, asset management scorecards have become quite common. There are a variety of approaches to creating report cards. Different approaches require different supporting data. All good report cards use grading systems that people can relate to easily, such as 1 to 5 stars that you're familiar with in hotel ratings, or grades from A to F, such as you see in your children's school report cards, or possibly color gradings as in traffic lights, red, yellow, and green. Whichever approach is used, it is important to apply the ratings consistently within asset classes, across asset classes, and across time. A consistent rating system will enable a municipality to track the progress of its AMP over time and allow the municipality to demonstrate progress on asset management to council and the public. For some examples of report cards and what they measure, see MFOA's infrastructure scorecards. And this document, I believe, is on our website, and I think a link is provided to it within our asset management report card primer. This slide does not show a report card per se, but it does illustrate the grading system and of a simple report card and provides the foundation for a very basic report card. It reports on the condition of assets. In many jurisdictions, the condition of the asset may be the most important information required for asset management purposes. At times, it may be all the information you require. As the primer indicates, a grade or condition rating is usually applied to every asset in the inventory, and the report card gives a numeric and alpha grade. Numeric grades are used to add and divide grades to get condition rating for whole classes or subclasses of assets, and corresponding alpha grades are shown because they are more intuitive. In addition, a condition description is provided that allows the user to have a sense of the asset condition that corresponds to the assigned grade. Conditions may be set through rigorous third-party standards or through a more informal technique such as visual inspection, or a combined approach may also be used. An example of a third-party condition index that's referred to in the primer would be the Bridge Condition Index developed by the Ministry of Transportation and widely used across Ontario. Some things to keep in mind with respect to this basic report card. The good news is that it summarizes lots and lots of data. Unfortunately, this is also the bad news. It summarizes lots of data. An asset class might well have a good overall grade that masks some very real issues or problems with some key assets in that class. From a budget point of view, those problems might have significant costs and urgent need, meaning that resources may have to be applied to projects in an asset class that overall looks quite good. Having notes to the report card can allow staff to identify key issues that might not fully be reflected in the score for the asset class. That's why your kids' report cards have comments in addition to grades. Knowing the condition does not necessarily tell you how to handle the asset when it comes to build the asset management budget. If an asset is not in great condition, does it get included in the capital program? The worst first approach is not generally seen as an optimal way to establish capital spending priorities. So just knowing the condition might not be sufficient to bridge the gap between your asset inventory and your multi-year capital plan. This slide illustrates a segment of a report card that uses a scoring system such as shown on the previous slide to summarize data and identify trends. It shows what this report card does is it's organized by service type, and what you see on here is water, wastewater, and stormwater. It shows an overall rating for a service category. It shows as well a trend line, and trend lines can be used looking backwards. How much have I improved since the last asset management review? Or it may look forward, the anticipated trend in the asset class if the capital plan that's recommended to council is undertaken. This report card incorporates both approaches with respect to trends. The second column shows the trend giving expected investments over the period of the capital plan, so a future orientation. And the last column shows the trend since the last asset management plan update. As noted previously, condition might be sufficient in small municipalities. The road condition might be all I need to know about my roads in a place that has not got a lot of other problems. However, your roads might have other issues unrelated to condition. For example, a road service could be in good condition, but the road is always congested. Or a road in a low-lying area is prone to frequent flooding after it rains. These are roads that have significant performance issues that mean they are not always able to provide the level of service desired by council or residents. To account for issues such as these, some municipalities create scorecards that take other factors into account beyond mere condition. And this slide gives a common condition rating scoring system with grades from A to F that will be combined on the next slide with grades that take need and capacity into account. This capacity versus need criterion could apply to roads, water, wastewater systems, transit systems, and other systems. This particular capacity slide gives an assigned grade of an A for any system of asset that is equal to or above 100%. How do you get above 100%? A system may well be oversized for future growth, for example, or a road network could be oversized for future growth. And the system goes all the way down to an F for any system that only supports something less than 70% of the demand for that service. It is important to note that there may be a variety of techniques to deal with demand and capacity issues other than through expanded infrastructure or more aggressive asset management planning. A common technique, for example, for demand management for water is to move to a full cost recovery model for water pricing. Municipalities that have moved in this direction typically notice significant reductions in demand as consumers adopt cost-cutting conservation strategies, and that can easily push out the need for renewal of assets or expanded assets into the future. This is a graph. This slide illustrates how a risk analysis can be added to a report card. And this work comes from the region of Peel, where they are in the process of attaching a risk measurement to every asset. The risk assessment is based on a standard type of risk matrix, and an example of a risk matrix is provided in the report card primer. This graph contains an absolute wealth of information. For each asset class, the user is shown the risk categories from low, medium, and high. The total amount of risk inherent in providing the given service in the face of no risk mitigation at all, and that's the white bars. The target level of risk that the municipality finds acceptable, that's the green bar. Note that the target level of risk is not in the low risk range for any service. A certain amount of risk has to be assumed. The current level of risk associated with the service given existing risk mitigation efforts is shown in the yellow bars. That is the risk that we have or experience today. And then this graph also shows two new views of risk going into the future. There's the risk 10 years out if nothing is done. That is to say, no funding is provided. Those are the gray bars. And we also see the 10-year level of risk if the recommended 10-year capital plan is adopted. Those are the blue bars. In addition, for each service category, the slide shows the amount of spending over the next 10 years that is recommended in the capital plan, and you see that on an axis on the far right. This approach uses risk to set budget priorities, and the amount of risk mitigation for the amount spent can be seen. And Council can know, service by service, how much risk reduction the capital program provides over the 10-year period. A particular type of multivariable report card is in use in some municipalities, and it layers in the level of funding historically provided for asset management compared to the level that is required. The example in this slide is taken from one firm that uses this approach. Comparing historic funding and funding required is an extremely important concept. It is an important component of understanding a municipality's infrastructure deficit and whether a municipality can afford the asset base it has. Municipalities that have used this approach have generally had very low scores with respect to the funding criterion. These low funding scores can produce low overall scores when combined with condition ratings. We are of the view that once asset management plans undergo further analysis and refinement, that the funding gap might well be reduced. And there are several reasons for this. Actual asset lives are often longer than accounting life expectancies. Assets have often had betterments that extend their life that were not caught in TCA accounting. Other cost reduction strategies can be brought to bear, such as demand management strategies and the use of technology to reduce costs. And to repeat something that I had said a moment ago, MFOA, in conjunction with our partners at LAS, have produced an asset management training framework over the next 2 or 3 years, and the very next elements of the training that starts this fall will be about introducing techniques that you can use to refine your current asset management plans. Once this is done, funding grades should improve since the costs required for state of good repair are expected to fall. So, in conclusion, there are a wide variety of report cards that are in use. It's a great tool to make sense of lots of data and enormous amounts of complexity. You need to choose the report card that best suits your needs, but do use some type of report card to help council and the public understand the state of their infrastructure. So that concludes that section, and I want to talk quite briefly about the asset management checklist. And all of these items have been made available to you, and they are also on our website. So I want, with respect to the discussion of the checklist, we're going to deal with just a couple of very simple questions. We provided a simple 2-page document. I think it's largely self-explanatory. The document that we built builds on an existing self-assessment checklist that has been on the website of the Ministry of Economic Development, Employment, and Infrastructure for some time. That, incidentally, is the new ministry title for the Ministry of Infrastructure. However, the checklist has also been informed by our review of a number of asset management plans that were previously submitted in December of 2013. So we're going to talk to you briefly about why a checklist is useful, why this checklist, and what the checklist covers at a high level, what it does and what it doesn't do. As you've heard me say already, an asset management plan is a multi-year plan that covers thousands and possibly tens of thousands of assets, and it is integrated with engineering studies, master servicing agreements, strategic plans, budgets, long-term financial plans. It is a very large undertaking. It's an interdepartmental undertaking, and it is a project manager's nightmare. Without a to-do list, things can easily go off the rails. So why this checklist? Well, for one reason, as I said, it builds off the self-assessment checklist that's currently on the ministry's website. But the other thing that this checklist does is it builds and includes a lot of the gaps that we identified in numerous asset management plans that we reviewed. This is a checklist in part that will help you fill in the gaps and refine your asset management plan. It is meant to include the elements of an asset management plan that are contained in the asset management guide. So this is just a high level, this I believe in the next slide are just a high level of identification of the various topics that are dealt with on the checklist. It talks about asset management plan integration. How is the plan integrated into the budget process, into the strategic planning process? It talks about asset management plan governance. Even if you're a small municipality, you need to think about how asset management plan is going to be governed in your municipality. Who is in charge of it? Who's in charge of updating it? How will you ensure interdepartmental coordination? The next section of the plan talks about council support. How do you keep council informed? How do you keep them moving in the direction that you want to move? As well, some of the tip sheets that you will see us talk about next week will also deal with some of that business about council support. It needs to cover the asset inventory. Asset inventories need to be complete, and they need to contain all the information you require to do your asset management plan. Asset age and consumption rates need to be included, as well as condition, and every plan needs at some point to be anchored in levels of service. This was an area where we thought, or where it seemed anyway, some municipalities had not had an opportunity or sufficient time to conduct fairly rigorous level of service exercises with their residents and their councils, and there is at the moment a bit of a disconnect in some instances between the asset management plan and the level of services that they're required to provide. Other headings in the checklist include budgeting. Once I have all of this detailed work in my inventory and I understand the condition and so on, I've got 25,000 lines. How do I go from that to building a budget, an asset management budget? Finance policies. It's recommended that you will need debt management policies, reserve policies, a lot of type of policies that would be required to sustain on an ongoing basis your asset management plan. There is also an allowance for some other future actions. You will remember, I'm sure, that the asset management guide from the province includes or exhorts us all to look at procurement strategies and the use of technology, alternative service deliveries, as well as other cost reduction strategies. So you've heard me indicate that the asset management plan checklist was built as a result of some of the gaps that we identified in asset management plans. Asset management, dealing with asset management integration, some of the plans were not necessarily integrated into the capital budget process. They weren't, strategic plans sometimes were absent. Sometimes the reference to how the capital asset management plan was related to an operating budget was not there. Governance, as I said earlier, often overlooked. Even in small places, it's going to be less complex, but it still needs to be spelled out and laid out. Asset management will be an ongoing activity, and unless roles are identified and the document and roles documented, responsibilities will not be carried out. Another area, and you heard Tom talk about this as well, is all of the area dealing with life expectancies. Many assets seem to have longer life expectancies than were assumed for accounting purposes, and these should be reviewed and appropriate adjustments made. We will have more to say on this, as I said, in the fall training coming up. Service levels, in a real sense, all asset management plans start with a service level analysis. Some AMPs did not include service level analysis, but did identify it as work to be done in the future. Some assets lack condition ratings and were merely assumed to be replaced at the end of their life expectancies. And when TCA accounting was done, many municipalities did not have the time or budget to estimate all of the betterments done to their assets, and hence the assumed life expectancies in the TCA inventory might be too low. So what does this checklist do? The checklist is not a list of things to do in the next 12 months or even things to do by the end of 2015. This is a multi-year to-do list. It's intended to be fairly exhaustive. We have spoken with large municipalities that tell us that full-blown asset management plans will take 3 years, and these are municipalities that are already well on their way. So, no need for a heart attack on this issue. What the checklist does not do. Lots of thought has been given to weave all of the elements into a project plan, but what is the sequence of steps? This checklist is not a project process map or a Gantt chart. You still need to figure out what needs to be done first, what can be done sequentially, what needs to be done in tandem, who's going to be responsible. You still need to map out the process by which all of the activities identified on the checklist will be carried out. Nevertheless, it does set out the things that municipalities need to think about, and it is useful in that sense. So that concludes my remarks on both checklists as well as report cards. And if you have any questions, either on report cards or checklists or on Tom's piece, we'd be pleased to try and answer those now. Well, we'll give this just a handful of seconds more, but it seems at this point there are no questions that we've received yet. So I think at this point then, since there are no questions, I am going to wrap things up. I very much want to thank my colleague Tom Bradbury for co-presenting and for the work he did to build those templates. I want to thank my other colleagues, Gurjeet and Eunice, for helping us on the technology side to mount this webinar, and I wish to thank all of you for participating in the webinar today. We're anxious for your comments and feedback. We will be interested in hearing or seeing most of you a week from today. I'm looking at Eunice. Do we have something after all, or?
There's a question, where can we get a copy of the templates? They are not on the website in a downloadable fashion. So we will have it available to you to download after the webinar, so look out for that.
Okay, they certainly should be. And anytime anybody has any difficulties, if sometimes links get destroyed, whatever, anytime you can't download something off our website, send us an email and we will fix the problem. Sometimes we don't know there's a problem if you don't let us know. And we'd be happy to make sure that you get all of these products. So thank you very much. That's it from our end, and we'll look forward to talking with you, or most of you, next week. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Tom and Dan, and thank you all for joining us today's webinar. A reminder to download the webinar materials for future reference. For additional resources on a broad range of topics, please visit MFOA's virtual library. The library is your one-stop shop for policies, RFPs, guides, legislations, and regulations from across the province. Visit www.mfoa.on.ca/library today. Thank you. Bye for now.